Leeds, Leeds, Leeds. What is happening? Welcome to Series 6 of Working Hours, an oral history podcast about a place called Leeds, a time called now, and an activity called work. Working Hours aims to record 1,000 loiners, that's people from Leeds, over the course of this, the most important decade in the history of the human species, and ask them about what they do all day and hear how they feel about it. My name is Simon, and this is all my fault. My mission here is to try to map out what my city, Leeds, a city that has declared a climate emergency, did during humanity's biggest emergency. On Working Hours, we hear how loiners have, are, and will be coping with our multiple and expanding crises during their day-to-day working hours. Can we turn things around? We'll find out. To tell this story, I need loiners like you, dear listener. I need people in Leeds or people from Leeds to come on this podcast and tell me about what they do and let me record how this decade affects us. These are long-form interviews meant to challenge the short attention span content economy. That means they aren't always easy listening, but in my view, they are all worth listening to. They all tell us something about our guest, our city, and our time, not to mention something of what it's like to do that job and how someone got into that job. You're helping this project right now by being a listener, and I'd love for you to consider becoming a guest or a supporter of this project. Thank you for listening to this episode. What did you want to be when you grew up?
Yeah, so I had to think about this actually. There was a brief period of time when I wanted to be an aeronautical engineer, but it was a very brief period. And other than that, I think I've always wanted to be a musician of some kind. And I mean, I kind of realized I was one pretty early on, or at least that's what I was really, really passionate about, and still am. But that yeah.
Go on, sorry.
I couldn't think of anything else that I wanted to be. It probably was but that's going back too far now.
So what did you play? What was the first instrument you sort of learned?
Guitar.
And were there any particular sort of guitar heroes for you at the time that you were emulating?
Loads. Yeah. Jimi Hendrix, first and foremost, I think. But also, like, not just as a guitar player, but as a character, as a person, as a singer-songwriter, and a lot of the things that he's not as known for. But Zappa from a pretty early age, and then later on, like Jimmy Page from Led Zeppelin, David Gilmour from Pink Floyd, and a lot of Brazilian stuff. So I play a wide range of guitar styles. So I should probably cite a couple of Brazilians because no one ever asks about them. They're my favorite is Cristina Azuma, who no one has ever heard of, but she's just amazing. Check her out. Yeah,
I will. I almost lived in Brazil. So,
oh wow!
I mean, I was over there for a bit, sort of 6 to 8 months, kind of thing. Yeah. So
what year?
I'll have a listen. I was there for the coup.
Really?
Yeah. So I wasn't there for the coup.
Yeah. I'm here for the coup.
But I was there. So what we talking? 2015, 16. Yeah.
Wow, I was there in '94 when they won the World Cup.
Oh wow, that must have been great.
That was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was there for like 8 weeks.
Nice. I was there. I didn't stay I never got to go to Carnival, but I was there in the kind of pre-Carnival build-up, and that was pretty ace, like random samba street parties, and it was great. What was I going to ask you? Oh yeah, music-wise. So I was going to ask, was there an inevitable band, or was there a series of bands? I guess because you sort of mentioned moving around before. So what was your band career like?
Well, it's not so much a band. I mean, I've been in a lot of bands over the years, but it's more. I make music, so I like doing stuff at home a lot, but I also like going out and playing with people. So I spent many years locked up in my whatever space I've had, and just tinkering. So yeah, I mean, having lived all over the place, I've sort of had to be the center of my own groups wherever I am. So because I'm also, you know, a songwriter, producer, I'm making the music. So I
Hmm.
kind of just try and bring people in to collaborate with and take that wherever I go, so to speak.
You're listening to Series 6, Episode 3, and to my guest, Seth Mowshowitz. This is another Squadcast recorded on the 13th of January, 2025. Hello, listener. Seth Mowshowitz is a neurodivergent father of 2 neurodivergent children and the benevolent dictator of Leeds music collective and now community group, Fold. He has as many nationalities as he has limbs. He's a designer with 25 years' experience. He's a big picture thinker. He's a self-employed music producer and performer, a teacher, a web and print designer, and web developer. Seth does a lot of different things for work, none of which pay terribly well because most involve music. He makes and performs music, mostly as the head/founder of a group called Fold. He teaches music and promotes music. Last year, he was awarded funding to run a music production workshop for young people facing barriers, which at the time of recording he was, or at least he was when he sent me the email with this copy, 4 sessions into. In Seth's capacity as a designer, he freelances for a charity called Ameliotis UK. He also helps out with his partner's disabled son as a carer when needed. Seth says, I'm doing this interview mainly in my capacity as the guy from Fold because that role best represents who I am and what I'm trying to achieve in my work. As it says in our bio, we aim to amplify humanitarian perspectives and critical reflections on today's world through our music. My apologies to Seth for my completely unrealistic suggestion of getting this out before his then upcoming gig at Seven Arts and the then upcoming Fold single release, which were both due at the time of our recording. He was, of course, very gracious about my total uselessness. Go to the website to buy some Fold music, merch, and to find gig info. Links are in the show notes and will be at the end of the episode. Right. Let's do this. Episode 158 of Working Hours with Seth Mowshowitz. So I'll jump into what are you doing now then? So I guess you're still in the same sort of area.
Well, yeah, this is another
Kind of.
another very long and complicated story. So, I mean, as a musician, I've only at certain points been able to actually pay all the bills of music. You know, I could count the number of years I've been able to do that on less than 2 hands. And the rest of the time I've had to be doing mostly web design. That was like my sort of secondary backup career, which I ended up doing for 25 years, you know. And I was doing it mostly full time in that period because I had kids. I got married, I had kids, and yeah, I was doing that on, you know, so full time job with 2 kids, trying to do, and then I separated, had to move out, and that, you know, so I was still doing the full time job through all that, and on top of that, all the music stuff. So effectively doing 2 full time jobs.
Yeah.
At all times.
Trying to monetize your passions and, you know, live your dream kind of thing.
Yep.
So I'm guessing, well, let's start with COVID because I think because there isn't a sort of how you got into it with that, because you got into it by picking up an instrument and getting interested in music and practicing, and you know, and you tried to develop the career from there. I guess I could ask you about how did the website skills come about? Was that just because it was something else to play with at the time? Was it through the music? Were you trying to kind of put your music online, and was it that kind of route?
There are elements of all of those things, but like I guess my second passion is art. It's a graphic design, you know, creating visual stuff. I guess it's visual communication. It's all ultimately about communication. It's like I gravitated towards music because I'm just such a powerful form of self-expression and you know, means of communicating and bringing people together and all those things. And I guess similar with the visual stuff, but just slightly less passionate about it. I did a lot of drawing when I was a kid, so I was doing all these, you know, all these activities. And then the web design was, it was kind of attached to that because I had a combined degree in art and music with a minor in political science in New York. And we were trying to like my brother was doing something similar out in LA, and he was a few years ahead of me. And he's a musician too, and a visual artist. So we're very, very similar, but he was always a bit ahead of me. So I was always looking to see, okay, what's he doing? How is he going to make money here? And what can I possibly do? But it just happened to be at the time when the .com bubble was starting to expand, and there was just, I was in New York, he was on the West Coast, and there were just venture capitalists throwing huge amounts of money around at these crazy business ideas. Nobody had any idea how to make money off of the internet.
Yeah.
But
And
everyone,
so many jobs as well. But yeah, it was all
yeah,
funding, wasn't it? It was just like,
yeah,
oh, we'll put loads of money into this business that isn't making any money or showing any profits or selling anything even.
yeah. It was a crazy, crazy time. And it was just right at the time when both my brother and I were graduating from our respective universities. And he had, like, somehow, without any experience, he sort of taught himself HTML and blagged his way into a very high paying job with zero experience. He was making like $50,000 a year. And I was like, wow, okay. I mean, that would go a long way towards, facilitating my little music career.
Yeah.
I wasn't even paying rent at the time. I was living with my parents, and just fresh out of university. So I was like, all right, I'll teach myself HTML, and I'll go and apply for jobs in Manhattan. So I went on all these job interviews, and in the end, I was like, kind of pitting them against each other. You're who's going to offer me more? And got a job, like, again, like $48,000 a year, fresh out of university, zero experience.
Yeah.
Somehow, like, I was technical enough because I've been working on computers a lot because of the music. The music all ended up being on computers after a while.
Yeah.
And I did all the graphic design stuff on computers in university. So, and I studied a little computer science. So I had enough of a background to do a bit of programming. I really wanted to do the graphic stuff, but there was much higher demand for development. So I started out as like a front end web developer, and I pushed and pushed to try and, wherever I was working, I was like, I want to do a bit more design. So I did finally end up doing that. But it took a while, and it was just this crazy, crazy time. And then, like, one company would just go bankrupt. The first one I worked for like nearly a year, and they were burning through $1 million a month without a business plan. There was just this Texan, multimillionaire bankrolling it. It was an amazing company. It was apbnews.com. So they were the first. So it's like a criminal justice news service, and they had 350 staff, including like this crazy, amazing journalists. This guy who had been one of the greatest journalists in Vietnam, and they were the first to publish all these declassified documents online. It was really cool. I even got to, like, I had, like, on my first day, I had to I had this phone call with the sheriff of Columbine, because they were releasing the Columbine recordings, like the recordings of all the phone calls in the schools, and that was my first day. I had to talk to this guy and record those conversations. But he was playing them through a tape recorder over the phone, and I was recording them on the other end with this special device that I've never seen anywhere else. And that was my first day. And I was like, whoa, intense.
Yeah, this is an unusual job.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's sort of a good snapshot. My whole career has been a bit like that. I've just ended up in these crazy roles and places doing bizarre things. So anyway, I could easily digress.
Well, I think that's a big part of it in terms of whatever passes for a career these days. It's just, all these random sort of something that you go into that you're kind of like, how interesting can that be? And then it's the most interesting because all sorts of wild things are connected to it, or doors open, or and all good, I guess, all good inspiration for the music.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I think I even sampled a little part of that conversation. Not the record, I wasn't anything insensitive, but yeah, the sheriff's just saying at the end of the phone call, he went, "That's it." Use that in the track. Anyway. Yeah.
So, so I said that I'd jump into kind of I'm going for COVID. So I'm guessing that is kind of a big part of where you are now.
You bet. Nail on the
Yeah.
head. Nail on the head.
So, were you doing what you're doing now before COVID and sort of going into it? Because my question generally is like, what were you doing as we went into lockdown, and did you have to work more or less? And then coming out the other side, what has kind of changed for you, if anything?
Yeah. So this one, this is pivotal. So going into COVID, I was doing the full time job. So I was a web designer for the Royal Horticultural Society, as it turned
Oh,
out.
cool.
I worked for them for 12 years,
Mm.
and I started working with them in London before I moved up here. But I somehow managed to convince them that I could move up here, work off at one of the gardens, Harlow Car in Harrogate,
Yeah.
and so I was commuting there for a year until they realized it was completely pointless, and then ended up working from home. So they were like, okay, but you have to come down to London a couple of times a month, and so I did that, and so I was still doing that. I'd actually started to get really burnt out with this kind of work because
Mm.
working behind a computer at home, there's a limit to how much you can do, and it actually does get harder and harder as you
On
get
your own as well.
on your own.
Like,
Yeah,
you need colleagues, and you need, I think, more and more, like, as you work from home, it's like you need somewhere to go. You need to get out of your house.
yeah,
Yep. And go and see other people and meet them and do something. And,
yeah.
you need that. That's a vital part of work. I think that's why we have other buildings that aren't our home for work.
It's a tricky balance for. So I like the bit that I was starting to realize at this stage was that both of my kids are we say neurodivergent. That's a kind of language that we have now. They both have autism diagnoses. One has an ADHD diagnosis. The other one has ADHD traits. My ex-wife has ADHD. My current partner has ADHD. I'm in the process of getting an autism diagnosis. I'm sure I'm autistic. I know I'm autistic. Everybody who knows me.
It's the super couple, isn't it? Autism and ADHD.
Yeah. But I was like having to. So my ex-wife and I, fortunately, we're very close friends, and we co-parent really well, and we've had to go through this incredibly long process of just coming to understand what these needs are, and then get them met. And so all the diagnoses, one of them we managed to get an EHCP, the Educational Healthcare Plan for. So he's at a different school where and they're fine. Like, I mean, fine. It's very difficult to get the right amount of support when there's not like a really extreme, obvious need. When it's a whole bunch of little needs, that's often that just falls between the cracks. So, and even for my ex-wife and I were like quite well educated, fairly privileged people. For us, it was difficult to navigate that system. I can only imagine how difficult it is for people with less privilege, people with less education. So it's tough.
And again, COVID, because I guess a lot of that was happening through the COVID period, and obviously you've got all the healthcare impacts of that pandemic. Yeah.
So my eldest started secondary school in 2020, and he had only just we managed in that time somehow to get him the EHCP, and it was all by the skin of our teeth. So that was really tough. But in the process, I was coming to understand that I was also neurodivergent, because I just found it harder and harder and harder to do what I was doing. Because as I was getting older, I was like, okay, because I've been masking my whole life, and I had these coping mechanisms that worked when I had more energy, when I was and I had fewer responsibilities, but I was having more and more responsibilities and having to juggle more and more things, and this huge mental energy drain. And I just so I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't bring myself to do the work anymore. So I negotiated to go down to kind of part-time, like 4 days a week. I was trying to sort of start to phase it out and figure things out. And then when the pandemic hit, I was isolated, working from home too much. And then that was it. I got so burnt out from the isolation, from the having to just exert all this mental energy all the time. I could not do it anymore. I probably did it 5 years too long. I should have
Yeah.
quit sooner, but you know, it was through a separation, through all these things happening. I just needed that security. But by 2022, I was like, nah, I'm done. So I developed like some really bad sleep issues. I was just not sleeping anymore properly, you know, just not getting restful sleep. I was in a really desperate state. So I got signed off work, and I finally made the decision to, I had the option of doing like a gardening leave or whatever, a sabbatical. I was like, right. I was hesitant to just end my career, but so I did that. I thought maybe if I give it a year, I'll start to recover and I'll want to come back. But in the end, I didn't. I was like, nah, I just can't do this anymore. But then, at my age, like I'm 47 now, and having to sort of figure out a portfolio career in this environment with this crap going on, and all the things that you're probably going to ask me all affected this, of course, made it that much more difficult. So I'm still, I've had to spend all my savings to survive in this time, and I'm still trying to figure out. I'm doing more and more bits and trying to build that income enough. But it's hard at this time of my life, and I am quite burned out, I guess. But it's improved. It's improving. Yeah.
But then, yeah, well, I mean, it's a sort of, every generation has its challenges and so on. But my God, this century's been like, for people who were essentially raised in what we are told at the time is relative comfort and, like advantage and so on. But then as you get older, you're a bit like, it wasn't that great, was it, when we were kids? And yeah, and 2008 especially, I think, is really underestimated. I mean, we're still suffering from that, and like everything else in this century. But it's because I mean, it was like Great Depression level events, and then we just kind of went, no, it's fine. We'll print loads of money and we'll do this, and everything's fine, and everything's not fine. So, what do I want to ask with this sort of thing? Well, let's move into the other questions. So, we'll do Brexit because that was around the same time. I mean, any complications for you with regards to Brexit? Like, did that change anything for you? Did you just have to read lots of stuff that didn't make sense, that changed all the time, and fill in lots of forms for no reason?
I mean, yes, all of the above. Yeah, definitely. The two different careers, it affected them both. Probably the web stuff less so. I mean, it affected GDPR and all that kind of, so we had to do more stuff around that. But yeah, otherwise not particularly, But the music definitely. We'd really been trying to build some bridges. So I used to live in Holland, and I have connections and friends there still. And so me and one of the bandmates went in 2019. We went over with our sort of newly pressed record that we had, and went to record stores and we're like, hey, we got this, and we did that and tried to just build some relationships, some bridges with Holland, particularly with the the idea of going over there and performing finally, because we've only really ever performed in the UK. So it was like, and we knew the referendum had happened. We were like, we better do something now to try and cement some kind of relationship. And that went really well. It was great. It was so much fun. And then of course it all fell apart a year later with the pandemic. But it hasn't. Yeah, I mean, Brexit's definitely affected us in terms of the music, because our audience is like quite disparate. There's a fair amount of it is in the UK, but there's a lot in Europe, a lot in the States, and the way that physical media work, like we did vinyl. We've done quite a lot of vinyl, and it was always much cheaper. I mean, usually they're pressed outside of the UK and shipped into the UK, even if whatever company you're using will do the actual pressing somewhere else, and so that became immediately a lot more complicated. I had to like become an importer and blah blah blah. So yeah, it has affected things definitely, and
Mm,
our ability to move around. Like we're even less likely to go and tour in Europe now.
mm. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just really hard. So
yeah. I mean, that's been a big one. Like in terms of people, most people that I've interviewed have kind of been like, "Well, it's rubbish," but it hasn't affected that many, sort of thing.
mm,
But where it has, it's generally sort of it's people who are sending packages or people who are wanting to tour,
mhm.
like arts and stuff.
It's really affected the arts,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. I mean, because if you can just jump on a plane, go to play a gig at Melkveg or whatever, it's easy, isn't it? But then if you've got
Was
to pay extra, yeah, pain
yeah,
in the bum. Um, but yeah, I suppose. But you know, and that's something that you don't really want to replace with online. Nobody wants to see a bunch of musicians do a Zoom meeting.
yeah. I mean, we thought there might be some scope for that during the pandemic. You know, people were doing this sort of those little, but yeah. I mean, as soon as it was over, everyone was like, "Nah, not doing that anymore. No
you
interest."
need you need atmosphere, and yeah, you don't get that on a Zoom meeting. Um, so I won't do social media yet. We'll do climate change. So in terms of your work, and you can think about this from both sides of the career. Um, how does climate change sort of impact things for you? Is it part of your thinking with regards to work or the design of your work? Does it play a factor or
It it
not?
it, it looms very heavily in the thinking and in
Mm.
the things that I'm trying to express through the music,
Hmm.
which is really what my whole thing is about. It's I'm kind of a I think I've written about this. If I have any kind of a sort of neurodivergent uh, ability or gift or whatever you want to call it, it's to be able to see patterns in you know bigger patterns in the whole, trying to well, I guess my whole life I've just been trying to connect bits of information, disparate little points and dots to build a more coherent map of reality. Let's put it that
Hmm.
way. And I'm always looking for other people's maps and trying to sort of overlay them and gradually start to understand how things really work and try to convey some of the truth of that
Hmm.
through music, which is not easy because it's quite cerebral, it's quite intellectual, I guess, and
Mm.
yeah, they're not easy things to express.
And it's not static either. That's the other problem. It's
True.
tricky because it moves.
Yeah,
It's moving all the time.
yeah. I'm happy to say I've not said anything that I sort of regret through my music or anything that I don't stand by after the fact a few years later. Luckily, it all seems to follow a logical and sound trajectory. So, yeah, but I mean, climate change is one of the biggest looming factors in that.
Mm.
We're all, you know, yeah, emotionally and intellectually, we're all affected by it, and
Mm.
we should be paying very close attention to it, and not just the fact that it's happening, but what is actually causing it, what's actually driving it, and you know, I mean, to sum it up, capitalism, you know,
Mm.
unbridled capitalism, and
Mm.
the various complexes, the fossil fuel industries, the you know the military industrial complex, all of these, and it's not a very it's not a simple thing, but the I guess the overarching thing is valuing profit above everything else is the
Mm.
issue, is the central
Mm.
issue, and that factors into absolutely every level of society, every layer, every you know every crevice. It's in everything. So it's how do we even begin to tackle that? So
Mm.
kind of trying to make that more transparent and draw attention to it, and in particular, what I've come to realize over time is how all of this is achieved through storytelling, through the use of narratives, through the you know that's to me what it boils down to. And I think if there's any hope of us changing these things, we have to really draw attention to how things are controlled using stories and narratives.
Mm.
That's I think what if you empower people with the ability to unpick that manipulation, and it lifts the veil,
Mm.
and people will start to be able to make more informed decisions, more better choices, you know. So that's yeah. in that sense, climate change and all the other big things have impacted me. But like on a logistical basis, not so much. You know,
Mm.
if if there was enough rising sea levels, Leeds would one day be a beach. I think, from what I can
Mm.
see, like 100 years or something. Might
Yeah, Holbeck Bay. Well, it'll be less than that because it's all sooner and worse. Uh, uh, so, I mean, like the big thing for me, the way that I think of it is energy. It's an energy crisis. It's not just in terms of, like the population that's ballooned to this size is sustained by those oil calories as well. It's enabled by, you can't have a population of this size without that calorific input.
Yep, 100%.
And it's the whole, like, even when you sort of, if you put it at money and debt-based money, it's like, but that's still the debt and the money is still energy.
Mhm.
It's still like
It
energy
represents energy.
store, yeah, or it's energy that's been used and taken and has become savings or whatever, which is a potential, which is charging with energy, with interest.
Yep.
And it's all, but we want to think about it in all these other ways. And it's like, no. You need to think about energy and your energy, like what energy you need for the day to get through the day and for everyone else around you to get through the day. Never mind what they're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, couldn't agree more with that.
So we've done climate change. So this will maybe be a bigger one. So the social media question. So here I want to look at your sense of return on investment. So the time and energy you put into any social media that you have to do for your work, is that giving you what you want from it? Do you know how to work it? Does it give you the sort of value, or is it throw what you can at the wall? I mean, I guess that you would have, what you're doing after working in web development and so on, but they're not the same field. So that might be just a random assumption that people make based on computer. So
no, you are correct there. They're definitely entangled, and
yeah,
and you have to. Well, certainly as a musician, you absolutely have to use social media. You don't really have a choice. How do you engage people? How do you reach people? That keeps moving around and shifting. But yeah, in web, you also, that's like any web-based company has to be on social media. So yeah, as a designer, as a developer, you're always dealing with it from day one. I've been on all of the platforms from day one, so I know a lot about how to use them as well, because I've had to use them for mostly for music, but also for other things. And I kind of I spend the most time doing it for Fold for the music, and I write them kind of as me, but for the whole. So saying a lot of this stuff and making these observations, amplifying humanitarian perspectives is the turn of phrase I've come to use. But as for like return of investment, very mixed, I would say, because it keeps changing, because the landscape is ever shifting, and it's difficult to know at any given time where it's best to invest your energy, and it it can vary per person, per platform, so much. So I'd say on some of them, like in the early days of Twitter, or the earlier days, like 10 years ago, I had I achieved a lot of stuff on Twitter. I managed to get the first lot of band members from Twitter, and a lot of gigs, and it kind of removed barriers to a lot of gatekeepers, and I managed to cultivate a bunch of useful relationships, and have really interesting conversations with people I wouldn't have otherwise been able to talk to. So I loved Twitter back then, but it's really changed. I think there's just a lot more algorithmic interference, and even though my timeline or Fold's timeline is very nice, and I haven't had to mute, weirdly, like despite all the things I'm saying, never been trolled. I've had sort of shouting matches with Katie Hopkins and things like that. Still never been trolled. It was like, okay, I must not matter. They don't give a hoot what I'm saying. That's fine. But yeah, nowadays Twitter, I mean, there's been a mass emigration over to Blue Sky, so I'm on Blue Sky, and that seems okay. It's nicer so far, but the bots are appearing, the OnlyFans accounts are appearing, and it's I feel like it's, if they're not careful, it'll just be snapped up and become Twitter overnight. Could be. Threads is irrelevant. Nobody cares about that. Instagram,
No.
weirdly, Instagram is a place where it's like we seem to get more engagement there than anywhere else.
But you get very different. I don't know if you've noticed this. If it like when you've been back in North America, and if you use social media sites over there, like it's a very different experience. Because I watch too much YouTube. And a lot of YouTubers will talk about various things and like, oh, this is being suppressed or that's being suppressed. And then like there'll be a video on my wall that's like exactly about that next to it. And you're kind of like, maybe that's happening there. Or maybe you're lying, or maybe something else, or, or maybe, who knows, with the wonderful algorithm.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
There's there's a lot of manipulation going on there for sure, and if you're trying to draw attention to that manipulation specifically and break it down a little bit, it just feels like we're not being shadow banned. It's probably, that's a bit too dramatic, but the stuff doesn't reach people as much as it used to even. So at the moment, return on investment, definitely not, and I'm trying to use it less. I'm just trying to really focus energy where it's needed, and keep it to an absolute minimum. And I do get the sense, having talked to a lot of people and just friends and family, like everybody's kind of losing interest in social media.
Yeah,
for probably that reason. It has been monopolized by nefarious parties, and it's just not. People just get tired of things after a while.
But it's also, I think it's also like the collapse of faith in institutions. It's like all of them are rotten. Oh, right, this is rotten as well. Like, because everyone got really excited during COVID, and loads of people who hadn't had a massive diet of memes are suddenly consuming lots more memes, and then everyone's believing all sorts of crazy stuff, and also found out lots of real stuff, and everything's mixed together. And then they kind of, once we open up, we're talking to each other again, and it's kind of like, oh, is that crap as well? So people are kind of like, well, that's rubbish too. I don't really want it. I think there's a bit of that to it.
Yeah. I also hope that, I certainly have just realized that, like, it is better to talk to people in real life, even on the phone. But it was also useful from a personal perspective. Like, Facebook was great for a while because for me, I've got friends in all these weird different places, and it's so hard to keep in touch with everybody. And it was really easy to just like put one post on my timeline and go, this is what I'm up to. Say hi if you're around, and it worked. It was great. I was able to keep in touch with everybody that way. My timeline was only my friends and people, posting stuff I was like really wanted to see. That's gone. And that's a shame, because it did work really well for what it was. And it's almost like people have forgotten what it was and could still kind of be. And there is no other platform that does what it did at the time that I can see, really. So
I remember being very resistant to Facebook for a long time before going on it. And it was, so before that, everyone was emailing. So if you had friends traveling or whatever, there'd always be an email. Sometimes it'd be, one to you or a part of a group one or whatever. But that was the way that people sort of kept in touch. And then all of a sudden, everyone stopped emailing, and they were all on Facebook. And I remember it because I was away traveling when this change had sort of occurred. So it was like, why have nobody answered your emails anymore, and nobody responds to, like, do we have to go on this Facebook thing? And I really hate it. I hated it the whole time. I've always hated it. But yeah, there were points. I spent far too much time on it, but there were points at which it was really useful. And there were, I watched pretty much all of Occupy on Facebook.
Yeah.
So I felt like I was there and involved. I mean, I did go down to the London one, and like sort of other things that were there that you felt like the fall of Mubarak and bits of the Arab Spring, and it's kind of like, oh, you feel like you're sort of there with it. Yeah. But now it's like, oh God, it's just noise and chaos and rubbish adverts and AI slop and please no.
The difficulty is that you need a platform to be completely independent, to be not owned by some horrible megalithic corporation, monolithic, not megalithic, sorry. And for the moment, Blue Sky is kind of that. I doubt that it's going to stay that way. But the same phenomenon is happening across all of the music industry, because this all applies to Spotify as well. And it's well, to a lesser extent, obviously, but in the way that it doesn't really pay very fairly. It weights heavily towards those, at the very top. And and again, like, people are trying to find more independently owned and run organizations to support, so that musicians can be paid fairly, and you can form a more a healthier community, a more kind of vibrant and active community. So I'm seeing that happen, which is great. And it feels like, I think my friend who runs a label in New York also is just saying exactly the same thing, that it feels like we're at this kind of early birth of these things happening, specifically in the music industry. But I think this is also true across other industries that were or have been more reliant on social media and web. That we're trying to move away from the ownership of these channels of communication to something else, and we don't know quite what that is yet or how it works. But of course, the difficulty is it has to be big enough that people have heard of it, and for it to be really useful, I guess. So we'll see. But I think it'll probably end up being a collection of smaller independent companies, organizations, whatever, running these things, and we'll should have a whole bunch more communities. And if they can stay independent and they'll grow, then that's great. So I'm looking forward to that happening. I'm remaining optimistic that it will.
So there's a couple of things that makes me think of. So I mean, talking about going back earlier in our conversation about sort of the early .com and the early kind of monetization, because that was always the thing of like, how are you going to make money out of it? How are you going to monetize? And even then, when I was so I studied as a mature student, and at the time that was like a big sort of thing. It was early days of Facebook and stuff, and it was like some of these things are actually starting to make money now, and I think Amazon was starting to turn a profit, and it's like, okay, so we can make money online, but how are you going to do it? What's your business model? All those kind of questions. But a lot of that now seems to be just, will you get a big check from the government? and that's how you make loads of money, and then you close the internet and then you get another big check from the government. And the other side of that I want to sort of pick your brains on is the footwork in the real world. So I don't know if you're familiar with Dan Akers, I can't remember how he pronounced his surname, but I did an interview with him, and he does a lot of organizing kind of events. And he did this great post on Instagram a bit ago about venues, and he started this thing. I can't remember the name of it. I'll have to look it up and send it to you. But he's trying to work with venues, because he's kind of like, what's the problem? Like, because it seems that, crowds and venues aren't matching up. People don't know about an event, or people, like, they sort of book a ticket for an event online and then they don't show up, or they don't show up because it's online ticket. It's sort of, and people that should have venues that have a good amount of people in aren't having them, and so the musicians aren't getting seen and aren't getting, sort of paid and exposure and practice, and then people aren't seeing live music, and venues are losing out. And so but then it's not just a matter of you know, because there's an issue there with promoters and how some of the promoters are kind of like engaging with venues and then engaging with advertising and marketing. And it's this whole sort of, it's like the ecosystem's broken. it needs kind of like new connections making and growing. So sort of,
Yep.
how are you finding all that? And I guess, is that how, because Fold FM, I'm assuming there's a radio aspect to that as well, because we've not really talked about Fold FM. So,
So Fold
go on.
Fold FM is just is the sort of the label that
Okay.
that I vehicle that I use for Fold, which is the
Mhm.
artist. So
Mhm.
I've had to do everything myself over a very long period. I've been doing it for like 12 years now ish, something like that.
Okay.
So I've had to learn how to do all the PR, all the radio plugging, and form, you know, all these relationships over a long period of time. And it does keep changing, and it has gotten harder and harder. And in the music industry, like, yeah, unless you make it big at a certain point and you become that kind of, not household name, but you know, you make it big enough that you're considered part of the canon, if you like, then you can achieve longevity, and there'll always be a little bit of room for you. You know, we've never quite made it that big, not, you know, but there's still a little bit of room, but certainly not as much as I would like, and it is getting harder. But like the promotion and all that stuff, yeah, we've really struggled. Like, it took us, the pandemic scuppered everything, and it took us like 2 years to get back to being able to just play live, full stop, because we were so out of practice. And it's, what we do is really complicated. It's, you know, technically difficult to achieve live. And then when we finally got back, we did our first couple of gigs, and they were all sold out, and it was great. And then, but since then, so since like early 2020, no, hang on, since, yeah, early last year particularly, it's been really difficult. And yeah, part of that is definitely people just starting to lose interest in social media, the cost of living crisis. People like aren't buying tickets until the very last minute. We had to cancel our sort of biggest gig last year because we just didn't have enough tickets sold a week ahead of time, you know, up to the week before. And there were loads of people who were like, I was going to buy tickets. You know, I was like, oh, you should have bought it.
Yeah, you should have.
Choice, because they can't afford to open the thing if they know they're going to take a... So anyway, so there's a lot of that happening. So yeah, the channels, people's engagement, these are all... I think it's very complicated. I don't think it's any one simple thing. And so it's not a simple solution either. The cost of living crisis isn't going anywhere. People are just getting, you know, poorer and poorer. Energy prices are going up and up and up. So yeah, it's not a rosy outlook for musicians. We're going to have to be very, very creative here. And yeah, this is why I think people are gravitating more towards using Patreon and, you know, sort of crowdfunding to pay for projects. Patreon's a really good model. I see this being used by a lot more people. And Substack also, like if you're a writer, it's a no-brainer, you know, it's a way to write and get published and make money without having to rely on... I mean, it is a platform in and of itself. So
yeah, and you've got to build a big audience. I mean, it's like something like only 3% of your viewers, listeners will go to Patreon. Like, so you know, you need VIP to be sort of large volumes. I mean, one of the other things that I was thinking, you know, and I was discussing this with someone else recently, but you know, obviously over Christmas, the time was you could have a Christmas song and that would be your retirement, you know, like, because it's going to get paid every year. You get the royalties from it. That was you done, you know, like you didn't have to have any more success than that. You didn't have to bring out a brilliant album, you know, or you have a hit song and that gives you a pretty decent life. And now you know, and the musicians that are making money, and they're making money because they're owning the licensing, the product, and the scale of their operation. Like, I mean, because I think music is the career that has been, or the industry and sort of area that's been the most sort of liberated in lots of ways, but the most destroyed by the internet, you know, like from Napster on, like that was a key kind of thing. And don't get me wrong, I loved all the sharing instant music stuff. Like, it's amazing that we lived in a time where it was sort of, you could think of a song and just go, oh, well, it sounds like this, and put it on. Like, that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I mean, obviously it's not killed music, because people still make music. They want to make music. They're trying to make music. But in terms of being able to earn from it, make a living from it, that's, I mean...
Yeah, the model doesn't work. The Spotify model doesn't work for the vast majority of artists who are on it. And, you know, even the ones who get a sort of reasonable amount of plays, it's so hard. I mean, you could not make a living. The number of people making a living off of streaming, full stop, is so tiny. The proportion, it's the same exact story as it was before. You know, the number of acts that get signed to a major label and can do that for a living, or even a big independent, you know, so the ratio is still about the same. Like, who can do really well in music, that hasn't changed. But the ability, at least, like, the difference is you can at least get your stuff out there, you know. Not that you can make any money from it, but that's, I guess, the big advantage. If you know, just in terms of getting your stuff out there and available to people, that's a form of democratization, I suppose. But when it's, you know, when you can't afford to do it, then it's irrelevant. You know,
is that kind of, well, I'm just thinking, is that kind of, does it feel better to make a song, record the song, and kind of throw it out into the ether, or to play a song in a venue to one person kind of thing?
Oh, yeah.
But because at least then you know that somebody has heard it, and you can see their expression, hopefully.
Yeah.
Or
the other unfortunate effect is that it has made the value of music, it's definitely devalued.
So much to compete with.
Yeah, it's made it more ephemeral, you know, because it's just available at your fingertips. People tend to engage with it less. It's more backgroundy. It's more, you know, and then Spotify is just playing stuff for you. Then, like, you're not even bothering to check what it is. You're not, you know. So some people get more engaged and get obsessive about cataloging and liking and, you know, making playlists of everything. And but they're, I think, a very small minority. The majority of people there's just much more passive listening. Before, when you had to buy a CD or a record, you would buy that thing and you'd be like, okay, no matter how, even if I don't like it, I'm going to have to listen to it at least 100 times to get my money's worth, you know, and you'd know exactly what the songs were called. And, you know, there was just a much higher engagement, much more active listening when you felt there was value to the thing that you were consuming. So that's definitely been an effect as well. And we've noticed in our audience, like, a lot of people really appreciate it when we do a physical release. So I really try to make sure that we do some form. You know, I'm having to be quite creative because it's hard to do. Like, vinyl is almost unaffordable, or it's completely unprofitable, sadly. But I love it, and, you know, people who listen to our music seem to love it too. But CDs we could still do, and that's all right. But yeah, that physical thing, like, people are returning to that. Vinyl was like dead; it was gone forever almost.
Yeah,
and you know, it had this resurgence right in the wake of all this ephemeral digital streaming. So yeah, I think
it makes it richer. I think, you know, like, I know someone that they're just like, I'm just buying records, I'm buying old singles and stuff, and it's really nice. It's really nice to sit down, put a record on a record player, and sit down and listen to it.
Yeah.
And it has more value because you've taken some action, and you know, it's intentionality. It's not just,
it's a journey.
Scroll, click, scroll, because there's no intentionality in that. You're not really thinking. You're just brain switched off.
Yeah, you need that physical journey to give it meaning, you know.
Yeah. The last CD I bought was the Random Access Memories Daft Punk back in whenever that was, like 2014 or whatever.
Wow.
And I bought it deliberately on physical media because I wanted to sit down, because I'd heard all the others on the CD, and I'm like, I want the CD and I want to listen to the whole thing in one go. So made an event of it. But that was the last time I bought a CD, you know, and that was years ago.
It's coming back.
And it's nicer. You know, a cup of tea that you've made is better than one that just comes out of a vending machine, because there's work that's gone into it. Yeah, it's all about work. So I've done my main sort of decade topic questions. So let's go on to the change question. And again, you can do this for both jobs if you want. You pick 3 for each side of your career, or just however you want to play it. You don't have to use all 3. If you could change any 3 things about your work, what would you change?
Well, it's interesting you asked that, because I'm in the, so what I have now is a portfolio career, So I don't make enough from any one thing that I'm doing, and I have to do a lot of different things. So I'm in the constantly changing this until I get the balance right, that I can actually, pay the bills and save something. And so I haven't quite even reached that point. So I am the music side of things. If I could change anything, it's just be able to be better at making a profit from music. That's the one thing, because that's my weakness. I'm good at doing I have a lot of skills that I've developed over the years, but I'm terrible at monetizing them. That's always been my weakness. I just don't care enough about money. So I need to care more about money and manifest getting lots of money. I'm really trying to do that, but so on top of the music, I'm still doing web design on the side. I try to work for charities, so that helps pay the bills. And then I did manage to get funding to run a music production workshop for kids facing barriers in the area. That's another thing. It's quite different, I have taught, and I do teach guitar as well on the side, just a little tiny bit. Like, I only have 1 student at the moment, but so yeah. And then I'm doing other stuff. I can't even remember all the things I'm doing now, but yeah. So if I could change any one thing, I guess getting enough equilibrium, knowing how much of which things to do at any given moment, to be able to just pay the bills and save something.
So if you were going to design, like, maybe not your perfect day, because you sound like you need variety. Like, you couldn't do the same thing every day, wrote over and over again.
Yeah,
So if you could design the perfect sort of week, how would that kind of look? Would it be, a few hours doing one particular thing on one day? Would it be a different thing every day? Like, how would you ideally like to balance things? Would it be more focus in one particular area, or would you push loads of other stuff to the side, or do you enjoy those extra bits and having to do that as well?
Yeah, so that is also the balance that I'm trying to get right. It's like, so the music demands a lot of time behind a computer, which I want to keep to a minimum, the time behind a computer. So all the other things that I'm doing that require me to be behind a computer, I want to do less of that.
Yeah.
Really, really give that mental energy to music. And the other things that I have to do to supplement my income would be to get out more and, do more sort of community-based work, things that, really need doing, that really need workforce around here. So I'm going to be doing more. I've applied for the sort of casual hours pool for Leeds Youth Service, who are that's who I'm working with to do the music production workshop. So I'll be doing a bit more of that. So just like getting a nice balance of, yes, I have to sit behind a computer, but maybe do that, quite a bit less, and just be out more, doing anything that involves being around other people and working in teams, and yeah, that would be ideal.
Would you, I mean, for example, in terms of your business development, do you have to be really proactive, and you're always kind of, I don't know, you have to put out so many emails a week to try and get so many people, or is it more kind of opportunities as they arise, and you kind of take things when they come up? Like, how much do you have to make happen, and how much? Well, I suppose sometimes, because you've made stuff happen, other stuff then happens off of it. So, but yeah, it's like, how much do you need to create the work? Are you constantly, like, have you reached that point where the work is kind of coming at you and you can kind of turn things away, or are you constantly having to kind of generate it and make the work all the time?
Well, because what I'm trying to push the hardest always is my own music, is Fold.
Yeah.
So you have to be, it's cyclical, and there's a lot of different elements to it that all happen in a kind of particular order over time, and they're very different forms of work. So I always have to be making music, I always have to be producing stuff and having output, because everything kind of revolves around that. So you create a release cycle, you know, so you're developing material, then you finish it, and then you have to, you know, sort of package it and figure out how to publish, distribute it, and then promote it, and then learn it with, or, you know, at the same time learn it for the live stuff, and yeah, there's this constant cycle, and they overlap, and it gets very, very complicated. And, you know, during the promotion bit, I have to be constantly emailing, and you know, huge amount of just that kind of communications stuff. Whereas at other times, there's none of that. So it's weird. And yeah, but that has to be going on all the time in order to create these opportunities and build up a catalog that hopefully you get a few that reach a bigger audience, and they start to become passive income because people are just streaming them in the background and they're getting played on the radio. And so you start to create these income streams, but they're all unpredictable. And like the best money in music is if you get a sync license. So if it gets used in an ad or a film or whatever, and those are completely unpredictable. You know, I've had a few in one year, and it was like my entire income. You know, it can happen, but that's pretty rare. So, you know, you're just completely ad hoc. So it's a really weird way of life, or way to make a living.
Yeah, and it's that thing of where you put your energies as well, because there's the sort of need to be everywhere, and also, but you kind of need to focus on where you're most effective as well. So it's
yeah, and it's that balance between what's you know, financially effective and what's artistically effective.
Yeah,
they're often completely at odds with each other. Because, you know, nobody wants to be facing all this difficult stuff all the time, and yeah, we're kind of we're that voice. We're like, hey, this stuff isn't bad, it's wrong, it's, you know, we're kind of the conscience, I guess, the voice of conscience. Nobody wants to hear that all the time, so we take one for the team in that way. We're not making Christmas number ones.
I mean, so I'm thinking. So obviously disavow me of this if it's, you know, just unrealistic or stupid or whatever, but would you, if I'm a musician, I would think about, because I would think about this anyway, but sort of contacting places like the Leeds Conservatoire, or Playhouse, Channel 4 kind of thing, but then I don't know if there's any process for how they get their music or use their music, or how they pick people to kind of compose for them or do things with them. What I guess, well, the other thing I guess I want you to talk about, because you mentioned sort of early in the recording or before the recording about sort of some time in New York, spending some time in New York. I imagine that New York has, obviously there's a massive everything there. But in terms of art and artists and gigs and stuff, I would imagine that the ecosystem there is really good for kind of letting people know what's on and that stuff is on. I mean, I might be totally wrong in this, but I guess what I'm getting towards is around the change question. It's like, what are the kind of things that you would like to see? So I've been working with a former colleague kind of on and off with, need to catch up, but wanting to put together like a filmmaker mixer in Leeds, because there were enough kind of filmy people and people who want to do film or work in that area in the city. The city is big enough, but there's nothing really there that kind of caters for that. And, you know, because the thing is always everyone gets sucked down to London, or I guess with music, you might go over to Manchester or whatever. But it's like, how do we, because there is talent in the city and, you know, it has long been, but it's like, how do we really foster that and get it working as an industry so that people can make a living in it? And obviously, I don't expect you to answer the whole thing, but I was like, is this sort of your feelings on that, or your insight, or kind of other things that you've seen that you think might work well in Leeds or would be good?
That's a really tough one. Yeah, I mean, I'm actually somewhat drawing a blank here. I've been steeped in this
I mean, I
so
suppose
long.
that's what you
It's like,
spend your every day doing, isn't it? Trying to think of that, of like, how do I do this? So yeah, that's the ultimate question, I suppose. Sorry.
well, yeah, I mean, I guess yeah, there are a lot of people who are working behind the scenes to build better communities. And like Leeds, I don't know, the Leeds music scene has always felt to me like quite a tight knit community and mutually
Mm,
supportive. And um, I don't know if it could be more so than it already is, maybe. But yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people who well, like when the floods happened a while ago. I mean, this was quite a long time ago now,
yeah.
actually. You know, a bunch of the businesses were affected, like the rehearsal spaces and studios were flooded, and
Mm,
we're gonna all go bankrupt. And a bunch of us got together and we bailed them out. We put on a show at the Brudenell and a couple of things like that, and managed. And that that's indicative of how how people support each other in the music industry. I think everybody's
mm,
like, even since then, has become just really hard up. Everybody's sort of like, I need to grab hold of this and hold it really
yeah.
tightly. And so yeah, I mean, I tried to reach out to people after, like at the tail end of the pandemic, and I was feeling like, oh, I'm just so burnt out, and I have to like figure out how to get back with people and reestablish the social battery and all that.
Mm,
So I reached out. I actually ended up starting a record label with a couple of people, and it's just done so badly, because it was like the tail end of that business model. We should have, if we'd done it maybe a year or two earlier, it could have possibly done all right. But digital label, nah, forget it.
mm,
But it was nice at least to like, we all had a similar ethos, and the idea was to just put it like a kind of multi-genre thing together and really focus on people who are trying to say something, who are trying to
mm.
tackle the difficult stuff and make that into a thing. But yeah, I mean, it almost worked, but it didn't. So
It's great, but it's also like, yeah, that's great, but it doesn't make any money, and it's like
mm,
you do get to a point where you're like, but I need to make some actual money at some point.
yeah,
Like,
it's really
how long can I have this career that's like great, interesting jobs, but I don't make any fucking money?
yeah,
Right?
indeed.
Yeah.
So I'm starting to be at somewhat of a loss, and I'm just trying. I'm just trying everything, and you do have to keep trying different things. So luckily, I'm
Mm,
not, at least not trying to do exactly the same thing and go, why isn't this working? Um,
mm,
but yeah, at this point, I'm looking around going, I think it'd be great if people could help each other out a little bit more. Be just, let's try and create independence through community. I
mm,
mean, I guess that's the key, really. That's all I can think to say is, yeah, we just really need to get out there and help each other out more. If we do that, maybe. But I'm not sure
mm.
exactly what the barriers are in Leeds itself. I do think like having a better public transport system would help.
Yep.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Bring back the trams. Uh, and they may be sorting that out. Perhaps, maybe. Well, fingers crossed. There isn't
I
even,
believe it when I see it. Yeah.
there isn't even a bus that goes around the ring road.
I know it's ridiculous. Yeah. Well, it's like I think there is one that comes once a day or
Yeah,
something,
okay,
and
yeah, but
it's like, at ridiculous hours. And it's like, what's that for? Yeah, absolutely ridiculous. They should be going round all the time, so that, so you can jump off at a point to come in.
yeah,
Shouldn't all just be you have to go into town, and then if you go in somewhere else, you have to get another bus out.
indeed.
Anyway.
But it's,
Yeah, this is one of the most ranted about things on the podcast is the shit transport.
I think that would make a huge difference in Leeds. It makes
Oh,
it
yeah.
makes everything more accessible.
Mm,
And but I mean, it speaks to the broader issue of just underfunded public services. That
mm,
everybody's poorer as a result. Everybody's struggling more, and
mm.
you don't want to go out because everything's shit. you know,
Yeah.
the
And then
experience is shit.
yeah,
So
and unreliable.
yeah,
So like, because other things are closing, and then it's like, you get there, it's not on, or you don't get there and you miss it. And it's kind of, and things are closed or a business has gone out of business, and you're kind of like, oh, well, let's see what's open today, shall we? I won't plan anything in advance because God knows what will happen in the next 24 hours. Yeah. But I think what you said about the, sort of during lockdown and that kind of more mutual aid mentality, I think we need to bring that back big style, because all this running around at high pace, it's not worked at all since we reopened. Like, there was that brief period when we opened up where it was sort of loads of people were making out gangbusters, and then we had all the interest rate changes and the war and the next stage of the meta crisis happened. But I think, and I think more and more, I think it needs to be in real space, in the real world. I don't think there's any monetary value in this for the rest, like online stuff. I don't think there's anything for the rest of us here anymore, if there ever was. I think it's like we have to make money in the real world. That's how I feel at the moment. Because, they turn up and they give you money and you build a relationship with them, and that's a proper relationship. It's not just something that's online that you can forget about whenever. I
agree. Yeah. That has to be the emphasis. And just more community mindedness, The latest like snow debacle here is a good example. I mean, I grew up in New York, and you just, when it snows, you just shovel your drive and you shovel your footpath, and you just do that, automatically. As soon as there's snow on the ground, you do that, because you know that like within a couple of days, it's going to turn into ice. Nobody will be able to walk, and it's happened. But like, people just aren't used to it. So like everywhere I'm going, nobody's shoveled anything, and then everyone's moaning that the council hasn't done it and they're slipping and blah, blah, blah. Well, you do have to, like, did you know that you're supposed to maybe do that? It's like, it's a good idea to have a snow shovel in a place where it snows. And but anyway, that lack of kind of just, if you're an able-bodied adult, come on, there's no excuse. You just get your shovel out and muck in a bit, and if everyone did it, it would be fine. You'd be able to get around, no problem. So those are the little indicators for me that like people just need to pull their finger out.
Yeah, but there's certain things that we obsess about over here, isn't there? If like, the bins, bins and potholes, and they're the constant. The most important things to seemingly English people: bins, potholes, and dogs.
Oh, don't get me started about dogs.
No, we won't have that. That'll go badly for everyone. So I'll move on to the final question, which is the UBI question. I assume you're familiar with universal basic income, especially, having worked in the world of tech. I don't think you can avoid coming across it. Are you familiar with UBI?
You know what? Not really.
Okay. So the idea is it's a floor on payments, not a ceiling. So everybody gets an amount paid, the same amount. It's not means tested. So that's the point. It's universal basic income. So, and the main thing being it's a regular payment, so you can kind of make plans around it. And there are various ways you could supposedly pay for it. Obviously, it gets rid of a lot of means testing stuff. I ask about it because I want more people to talk about it and be familiar with it. And also I want to hear other objections to it. Other than, oh, well, nobody would work because everybody is inherently lazy, which I think we know from the pandemic is not true. There were plenty of people working really hard for very little to no money through that. And most of us wanted to do something through that period, even if we were doing nothing. So if there was a kind of regular payment, you can imagine in your own head how much that is. How do you think that might have changed things for you, or how do you think it could change things for you now?
Yeah. Yeah, I have given it a little bit of thought over the years. Yeah, when you introduce something like that, there's always going to, I mean, were you to introduce something like that, there's always going to be a shift in culture. And yeah, there will be some people who are like, right, I'm not going to do any work. But I think you're right. The majority of people are going to, I have a little bit more faith that the majority of people would do their bit. I'm of the sort of Star Trek: The Next Generation model where you know, you don't work for a living, you work to improve yourself and society. And if if you're rewarded for that with something like universal basic income, I think more people would be willing to think that way over time. But there would be that initial shift where there's people not doing what they should be doing, and some people doing a lot more than they should be doing, because there's plenty of people out there. There's the caring economy. There's the undervalue of those who actually do caring work. That's just massively undervalued. It hits women the hardest, and that having a UBI would definitely help all of those people, and they're the ones who really, really deserve that help. So I'm all for it. I mean, I didn't know exactly what you meant in terms, like, I've heard of it, and is it really gaining ground? Is there, how much? I don't really hear it being talked about that much, to be honest.
It's one of those things that, like, some tech bros like it. There was a guy who was running for US president a few years back, Andrew Lang, who was pushing it hard. It's kind of it's bigger online. There's a good interview because there's a UBI organization in Leeds, and I talked to one of the people from there. So there's 2 interviews with Reinhard from the UBI network in Leeds. So there's one just sort of more particularly on UBI. Some of the reasons that I really like it. So I buy a lot of the modern monetary theory stuff. And I'm kind of like, yeah, it seems reasonable to me because we are printing our own currency. And if you're spending that currency on goods and services rather than just printing money, then you're not going to get the inflationary effect. But I think the thing is, what we need to do, and what successive governments are refusing to do, is put money in our pockets. Mm-hmm. It's always like, well, we need to bail out the rich more, and we need to give them more stuff, and we'll do whatever heinous, news things we'll get to distract people and get them excited about something, but we're not going to address everyone's declining living standards and how everything's getting harder and more expensive, and our life expectancies are shortening and all of those kind of things. We're not going to put money in people's pockets. And I think that's what we need to do. That's the only way that we're going to move anything forward, is if we put money in people's pockets. And I think that, we've created all these divisions in societies and all these new sectarian rubbish from personalized echo bubbles and all of this kind of stuff. We need something to unify people. And I think if we all got the same payment, and that was, part of our agreement of being British, we didn't just pay tax to pay for wars and bailouts, I think people would feel a bit better, be a bit happier, and be a bit more optimistic about the future and so on.
I feel the same way, but I point back to that goes very much contrary to the prevailing narratives and stories. And I honestly, and I try to get this through to people, the remit of the current government, and I don't care if it's Labour or Tories, the remit of this government is to funnel as much money away from the public to private interests. And that is how they've behaved since 2010.
Yeah.
Unequivocally. And I don't see any evidence to the contrary that's changed. That's still what they're doing. And they don't want to put money in your pockets. They want to take money out and as much as possible. So until I see some real shift in that, I don't hold out much hope for something like UBI. But I like, what is it going to take to bring that change in? How do we stop this from happening? When did this become so entrenched? I don't believe any current electoral result is going to shift.
No, but the electorate are as much to blame for that as anyone else, because we were, I think, like, at the moment, my plan is, like, what we need to do is we need to kill the Lib Dems. Like, they need to die as a party, just be gone. So we need to start thinning this stuff out so you don't have the splitters and stuff. And I think ultimately it should be, our goal is to get rid of Labour and Conservatives, get rid of those proper two establishment parties, which are the only two brands that actually matter, which is why it's only going to swap between them. But I do think Farage will be in at some point. We want to boil it down to, like, whatever his latest party is and the Greens. That's where I want to get to. And then in my mind, we've made some progress of, like, at least we've changed, the type of political class. But I mean, as long as we only ever switch between the Conservatives and Labour, which is all that's ever going to be possible, really, if we're realistic about it, then nothing's going to change, because why would it? They're both captured and owned by all the same interests, and they only think one way, and they only hire people who think one way. And until we're in a process like that goes through, I mean, we kind of are, if you think about the First World War and, like, all the monarchies that fell and the leaderships and the generals, and, like, you get to the point where you start running through people really quickly to try and find someone who can do something. We have clearly been doing that with prime ministers over the last few years, like, and that is not stopped. Like, I would be surprised if Starmer's there at the end of the year, because who's done more than 2 years in the last So yeah, that's my view on it. I think we need to, until we accept responsibility, stop reading the same crap news and buying the same crap news stories and voting for the same crap parties. It's on us. It's on us.
I agree. There's probably, we should hold ourselves more accountable than we do. On the other hand, I think we also really need to tackle, that's why I keep saying stories and narratives. This is how the whole thing is being controlled, really, because it's people's thinking that's warped, and it's warped by these narratives, and it's who is pushing them and why and how. And that until we tackle, for me, that's the elephant in the room, and it always has been. There's no regulation and meaningful regulation around any of that. And of course there isn't, because it's how the people who are currently in power got there, and how they stay there, and how they keep doing this. So I don't think there will be any of those changes remotely possible until we deal with that. And we start saying, no, we can't keep allowing the Sun and the Daily Mail to say these things and put this into the minds of people. And not just the Sun and Daily. It's really the whole thing. It's even the Guardian is complicit. They're all complicit. And it's a system of self-regulation, for Christ's sake. It's not going to work, and they always point to, well, this is great because it's, it prevents censorship from happening. Well, yeah, but it enables what I guess they call it the politico media complex, or whichever way around you want. That is so firmly in charge of this whole situation, in my opinion. And I keep banging on about it, but and the whole time I've been here, I've only seen it get worse.
Well, and also, funny how how easy it is to make a living in that industry. Like, with all the challenges within that industry, like I know it's a hard industry. Like journalism, it's hard for some. It's hard if you're from a non-London, non-public school background, for example.
Yeah.
But the money that they're on, hundreds of thousands of pounds in many instances for these sort of, and it is just jobs for the boys, essentially.
Well, it's like that line.
But they serve a purpose, because otherwise they wouldn't be, they get that because they come from a rich background, so they're entitled to it, but also because they're doing an important job for the system as well.
Absolutely. So I think we have to keep calling this out over and over and over again, and until it starts to ring true for people, because you can't keep blaming things that aren't actually responsible for your situation. You just drive yourself mad doing that. And they can only wheel out the same scapegoats so many times before people start to go. I mean, I really feel for the working classes who are being treated that way, particularly because they're the ones who've been exploited the most the whole time, and being told that whatever you want, Muslims or terrorism is responsible. They never get what they deserve. It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's such a terrible situation.
Yeah.
But
it's always, put me in charge. Oh, it wasn't my responsibility. Oh, it's all on you. It's your fault. Oh, it's not your fault. It's them. And don't, never mind my pockets or that drawer full of gold. Ignore that. Yeah. Look over there.
So what is it going to take? How do we, how do we educate those people? How do we get them? I think there probably are quite a few people really starting to catch on now.
But I think I think part of it, of how they maintain, how the impression is maintained of this constant stupidity, is that there's always new people coming into the system. So there's always people that are catching up, and always people that are, because we're all learning all the time. And you have to kind of catch up to, oh, that's what's happening. Oh, that's the, and go through all those processes of unpacking all the stuff that we are guilty of indoctrinating our children in.
Yeah, we're not teaching it.
No, we're going to change that, and then go do all the things that I said I wasn't going to tell you to do.
Yeah,
I'm going to tell you to do them now, and then it's on you to figure it out from here. Even though I should have been a bit more help on that, but I've been busy. It's hard. I think with it's. We kind of expect too much from ourselves as well. Of like, what we're going to be the ones that figure it all out, are we? And we're going to, we're going to be the ones that do it really well. And we're just tired and it's like, you've only got so much energy for being, like, I'm ready to change the world. And then you're kind of like, I might change my socks.
Yeah, I'm running out of energy at this point. For sure.
So yeah, we do what we can. We do what we can, I think, is the main thing. But you have to kind of figure out for yourself what are the parts that you play, and what are the. Oh, look, I've got a musical sort of link there. What's your function in the band, and so on. So I'm just rabbiting nonsense now at this point. So I'm going to kind of wrap it up. So first of all, I'm going to let you say anything else that you want to say at this point, or if you want to ask any questions, and then I'll ask for the socials. So if there's anything else you want to add on UBI, or anything you want to say about anything else we've talked about, or you want to talk a little bit more about anything else that you're working on or coming up, or you want to ask me a question, now's your opportunity.
Well, I think I've probably said my piece, to be honest. But I mean, I don't want to use this as like a platform for self-promotion. So there's stuff coming up. If you're interested in the things I'm saying, you might be interested in the music. So you can check us out. I know you're gonna you'll tag our socials and whatnot.
Yeah, and I'll be cheeky as well. Do you want to? Is there any piece of music that you'd want to put in the show, or will that be a cost to you? But if you do, we can stick one of your tunes in there.
Yeah, sure. Episode. By all means. Yeah.
So where can people find you? Where can people check out the music and what you do, and where and when maybe can people come and see your work?
Oh, actually, yeah, we do have a gig on the 24th of January. I don't know when this is going to come out, but if it hasn't yet, we're at Seven Arts in Chapel Allerton on January 24th. That's a Friday, so that's a good time to go out. Shouldn't be snowy, hopefully.
Hopefully.
And there's going to be a new single coming out on the February 21st. And then there will be a 7-inch. Hooray! So look for that. And you can find us on fold.fm, Federated States of Micronesia. Fold.fm. So that's our website. Don't go to social media. Well, if you have to, we're Fold FM on everything else. So Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook, it's all Fold FM. So yeah.
In terms of the record, Are there any physical outlets that are selling that, or is it all via the website? Is it all online?
Alas, it'll be a very, very limited edition, so it'll just be through Bandcamp and Ampwall, which is a new one.
Cool.
Nice.
Well, thank you very much for your time today, Seth. It's been very interesting talking to you, and sorry for taking you off on random tangents.
No, that's how my brain works. So I'm really, I enjoyed that. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you again to Seth for being my guest. I've changed it back to first name only because it sounded too formal. Let me know if I should adjust the last 2 episodes to fit the convention again or leave it as is. Unless anyone says otherwise, I'm leaving it as is. Thanks as always to all my guests, and thanks to you, Leeds, for being my subject. You can find Seth at fold.fm, instagram.com/foldfm, fold.bandcamp.com/album/resistance-refusal-ridicule, and youtube.com/foldfm. Fold is on other channels, so go to the Fold website to sign up to their newsletter and to find those links to their other channels. And go buy some music from them. When was the last time you bought music? Bloody ages ago for me. If you'd like to contact me about anything Working Hours related, then you can email me about the show at workinghourspod@western-studios.com. Okay, that's me. Remember, listener, no matter what you do, it's impossible for you to understand anything that your salary depends on you not understanding. So try to work for peace and try to plan with kindness. Raise your voice, but reduce your impact. Cheers, ears. Take care out there, and be kind to each other, Leeds. Working Hours is produced, recorded, edited, created and published by Simon Treen for Western Studios Leeds Limited. The music was The Bees from Chopin's Etudes, which is in the public domain and was taken from museopen.org. Remember, Western Studios Leeds Limited when you're ready to start making your content in West Yorkshire. Follow Western Studios Leeds on Facebook, facebook.com/western_studios_Leeds, and on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/company/western-studios. Bookmark western-studios.com so you can see the latest prices and use my contact page to drop me a message about your own podcast project or working hours at any time from anywhere. Maybe you want or need a podcast host, co-host or narrator for your podcast project. Maybe you just need another voice for one or more episodes of your show. Podcasts are so much more than gossip, book promotions and marketing for online courses. Podcasts and other audio content get your online brand out there. Want to make some fundraising case studies? Want to have an audiobook or video course? Want to share your learning, knowledge and expertise in your field? Want to learn, teach or raise awareness of something general or particular? Want to improve internal comms with messages your staff might actually engage with? Or do you just want to brighten up the world with some entertaining content? Then make a podcast. If you're making your podcast within West Yorkshire, then think about making it with western-studios.com. Whatever your podcast questions or needs, get in touch with Western Studios Leeds.